Welcome everyone to the first episode of Floof Talk, our new Thursday show where yours truly and Simba get into it on any topic you want, furry or not. As always, I'd like to remind everyone to mute your mics for the duration of the show. Any discussion you have can go in the speaking voice section right above this voice chat. Any suggestions for topics for tonight can go in the Floof Talk chat right above that. So, as always, it's your boy Nova the Bass Skunk, and I'm here with Simba, Kitty King and leader of Furry Valley. Thanks for being here tonight, Simba. I'm super excited for our discussion. How are you doing?
I'm really hyped. I've been looking forward to this for a few days. I'm sure it's going to go well, and it's, as always, a pleasure to have you here with me. The podcast has always been a highlight of my week, and this hopefully will become another.
Oh, I sure hope the same. I love doing the podcast, but I think this is going to be a lot of fun too. For those of you who only just got here, we're going to be discussing not just furry topics, but absolutely anything you guys want to hear. Make sure you put your suggestions for topics in Floof Talk. And since we don't have much to say, why don't we just dive right on in?
Yeah, so we've got a range of topics to discuss tonight. We're just going to play it by ear, go for about an hour, and the first of those topics is coming out as LGBT to your family. So Nova and I are both gay. What was it like for you, Nova, coming out, if indeed you have come out?
I'm very fortunate, whereas my own story of coming out, though with its own trials, I came out very shortly after my father had passed, but I also had, despite a very conservative Southern environment I was raised in, I still had all of the support from my mother, and those friends who stuck around were absolutely wonderful for me in my journey of becoming the chipper gay skunko you see here tonight. But I can say that my experience coming out definitely is not reflective of most people who have to face the same.
And you're a religious, or at least you come from a religious family. Did you find that awkward or difficult?
Uh, well, again, I wouldn't say that I was raised in a particularly religious household. It was more spiritual. They're very much in tune with my own spirituality without ever having labels or dogmas attached to it.
You didn't ever get it pushed on you. That's quite nice.
And no, I'm very fortunate in that regard.
Mm-hmm. I was not. I mean, my mum is Catholic by name, at least. I mean, she goes to church once a year for Christmas, and that's pretty much it. But as far as the UK is concerned, that's probably more religious than average. And growing up, I guess I was raised to, you say your prayer to God every night, and you just do that, and but it was a sort of loving kind of religion, though. It wasn't like, oh, you're going to hell if you're this, that, and the other. It was sort of, oh, you're just kind of grateful for what God's done for you. And I believe it's all bullshit now, but that's, I guess, how I was raised. My extended family is certainly more Catholic than my mother is, and I'm not actually out to the vast majority of my family, which in a way, I don't like it. I'd like to be able to be properly out, but I think it would sort of cause more problems than it would solve. In a way, it's sort of almost better they don't know, because there's no benefit really from telling them,
Yeah.
other than sort of. I mean, I don't see these people much anymore anyway. When my cousin came out to my nana, she went upstairs and cried and cried and cried her eyes out because she felt that she'd personally failed him, because she had the sort of opinion that, oh, I must have done something wrong or he wouldn't have been gay, and that's tragic, awfully sad.
Uh, as a quick aside, because I do want to follow up on that, you mentioned how the religion over there is a floofier. Is that
Yeah.
reflective of most religion in the UK? Because I know that where I live, especially in the American South, there's a lot more fire and brimstone in our religion.
Yeah, generally the religion in the UK is quite floofy. We don't have, I think the average Christian, the average Jew or Muslim here is less extreme than in other places. There's no kind of, if you're not religious, you're going to hell kind of shit. It's sort of, I don't know, even Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff. I mean, I think I'm in my late 20s, and I think once ever have we had someone like that knock on our door. So it's not really like it is in the US. The normal person doesn't attend church. They might say they believe in God, but they don't pray. They don't really. They might wear a cross on occasion if they're kind of religious. Um, I think people identify as Christian here a lot more than they practice being a Christian. And my sort of view, my mum would occasionally try to drag me to church, and I always said, well, if God's everywhere, why do I need to go to church? So, and I think sort of implicitly that's the assumption most people in the UK would take.
It's funny. I went to a Catholic school for several years, and I remember we watched because we had one class dedicated to religion every day, where we had watched a video about misconceptions of what Catholicism is supposed to be, and it opens on one of those sort of family friendly after school special sort of deals. It clips to different people. I go to church on Saturday because it fits my schedule better. I
Yeah,
don't go to church at all because it fits on my own time. And then the announcer comes in. This is wrong.
yeah.
Very dogmatic here. Very follow these steps or you're getting punished sort of view of religion.
It's almost like, yeah, they want to pressure people into being religious rather than accentuating the positives of it and therefore making people actually want to be. It's the fear of not being religious rather than the gain of actually being religious.
Absolutely.
That's a shame. I think when I came out to my parents had always said to me, you can tell us everything and it's okay, we'll never judge you and stuff. And so little 12-year-old me was like, yeah, I went downstairs one night and I'd realized at that time by role playing with other gay lions in Lion King chat rooms that I probably liked and my parents was out and just watching something on TV and I was like, by the way, lol, I'm bisexual. And I turned around and I went to leave the room and they were like, wait, what? Wait, that you can't just say that? And I was like, but you said I could tell you everything. Um, Naive autism. But yeah, so my parents, my mum especially thought it was a phase, and that I would grow out of it. My dad said, that's okay because I've seen weirder shit on TV. So that was okay, I guess. And then probably a few months after that, I was like, no, I'm not bi, I'm gay. I don't like girls at all. And I think my mum was okay with it because she'd figured she'd get grandchildren from my little brother. Now I think my little brother's also gay. He's not come out, but I'm like, yeah, he goes and stays with another guy he met on the internet, and he stays with him for like 6 weeks at a time. And it's like, if they're not in a relationship, I mean, they're not just playing
I'd be a
Dungeons
little
and Dragons,
uncomfortable
mom.
if they weren't in a relationship. Oh, this is just some guy I met online
Yeah,
that we hang out for 6 weeks at a time, but I'm not
yeah,
into him.
yeah. He literally like goes to his house, and they tell my mom, "Oh, we're just playing Dungeons and Dragons. We're just like watching and ordering pizza." And it's like, you don't do that for 6 weeks. Like, come on, you must be doing some more than that, right? Yeah,
But pulling it back into the discussion, you said that you wish you could come out, but it isn't really worth it, and that ties into what you've said previously, especially on the subject of should you come out as a furry,
yeah,
where I think it's risk analysis. By you doing so, it will make things better, then perhaps it's worth it, but if you really have nothing to gain, then
yeah, yeah,
it's not worth risking your safety or your sanity,
yeah.
especially if you're still a minor and you're living under someone else's roof.
Yeah, absolutely. If any of you here are young and rely financially or otherwise on your parents, don't tell them you're gay. It's a bad idea. Because at best, you're going to be accepted. At worst, you're going to have to, age 14, 15, find a way to support yourself. And that's not what anyone should have to do. I mean, it's fairly typical in the UK. If you do come out, it is normal and it's fine and that's okay. I think this applies more so to the US, but even in the UK, I would be careful about it. And sort of the point that you made then over about not doing something if there's nothing to be gained from it, or nothing really to be gained from it. I think that actually extends much more widely. I was having a discussion with a close friend of mine a few days ago where he could take a course of action, and at best, he could break even by the course of action. Like, the best possible result is that things would stay as they were, and it was quite a lot of work to do what he was trying to do, and the potential worst case was really bad. And I think this is a general principle that you shouldn't do anything in life at all if the best outcome is that you stay where you currently are, because you've invested time into it. So if the best is to stay where you are, you've lost your time and gained nothing, and you could have lost your time and got a worse outcome. That's something which I think people do too much of. They'll take an action without really paying attention to, well, am I actually ever possibly going to gain anything from this? And I think that's sort of coming out to my extended family is sort of an example of that. I don't see them, so why bother? It's not really anything tangible to gain. But if they start pressuring my mum or something, that would just be awkward. And I don't think they would, don't get me wrong, but there's nothing to be gained, so shrug, why bother?
And I think that's a good lesson for everyone in general as far as managing your own priorities, especially for younger folk when things, especially on a social level, become a stressor in your life, when it becomes something that takes up a lot of your time that you have to dedicate to find your own sanity in. If you can look at it and find that I don't know. I'm looking at the younger folk I know here who are in high school. I'm looking at people involved in furry drama. If you could just step away and not say anything and have a better outcome than you trying to continue to put forward this effort into something that's in the long term meaningless, then why bother?
Yeah, I mean, I think we get a lot of people in our customer service a support system on Telegram, and they message us, and I think to myself, I could buy your face off for saying that kind of things, but then it's like, well, yeah, but like, what am I really going to gain other than venting at this person? Then they go and put it on Twitter, and they just, it's not worth. So, yeah, shall we move on?
Yeah, I think we've about hit the end of that topic.
Okay.
So are we going to go to this next one?
Yep.
Alrighty, so we got the request to discuss the pros and cons of capitalism. And
Yeah,
I know this is absolutely a hot topic for folk, especially since we live in a soundbitey sort of civilization these days, that I feel like it's not a genuine conversation to have. That we just lost like 4 people. They are not ready for that seriousness tonight.
We weren't joking when we said we were going to discuss everything, but yeah, capitalism is an interesting one. I think in the West, because obviously we live in a capitalist society, we're raised to view this as the correct thing and the ideal. And obviously we're enemies in inverted commas with Russia and China and these more communist sort of places. So in a way, we're sort of educated to think of these as backwards and capitalism as innately better. But certainly in the past few years, the growing differential between the 1% and the rest of everyone else is sort of an indicator that something's not quite working with this. I think people are becoming more conscious of that.
I think it's just that when having this discussion, the problem is not inherently capitalism. It is that the system in which we live has been corrupted. And it's not that a socialist institution could not also be corrupted, but because we put so much more power into the free enterprise, that money speaks and money speaks loudly. So when we allow that to go unchecked, the 1% get essentially whatever they want on both a political and a legal scale.
Yeah,
And it's my favorite graph to bring up in these discussions. I can't do so now, but either Stanford or Harvard did the study, and when you compare the likelihood of a bill passing to both public will and the amount of money that went into it from third-party interests, there is literally zero correlation between public opinion and a bill passing, but it's totally one-to-one correlated how much money went into lobbying for that policy. So in these capitalist societies, money speaks.
Yeah, that's obviously concerning. We had, well, in the UK, we've had about, it must be about 8 years ago now, we had pretty bad rioting in London where people just got sick of being poor, I think was the long and short of it. And they torched many stores in London. Looting was rife, thousands of people arrested.
including the
And
guy who played Goyle from Harry Potter.
was he really?
He got
That's
caught running off.
wonderful.
You can find a picture of the man running off with pot plants.
That's amazing. It's so typically Guile as well, isn't it?
It really is.
But and of course, 3 years ago we voted to leave the EU, and I think the day I never brought this up to you before. The day after we voted to leave the EU, the number one search query from the UK, including the term EU, was "What is the EU?" And I think that sort of goes to highlight that we don't particularly give a shit about the EU. We just want something to change. And if you give the public who are deeply unsatisfied the choice between, okay, well, you can keep what you've got now, or you can change something, even if you don't know what that something is, they're going to say, well, fuck what we've got right now. Let's go and change and try something new. And I think the sort of lack of representation by normal people, because capitalism allows policy to be bought, means that this kind of thing is really expressing itself in some quite unexpected ways. I think the political sort of establishment really doesn't like that they gave us the Brexit vote, because normal people said, okay, well, we want something to change, and they didn't expect us to vote for that. Well, I mean, they really should have done, but
And mind you, I'm going to be the biggest critic of capitalism as a whole, but I still want to pull this away from the fault of capitalism, because this is not capitalism inherently, it's capitalism left unchecked. Buckley v. Vallejo, which is the court case that states that money does on a legal in a legal system represent free speech, that's existed in America for almost 40 years now. I want to say 76 was Buckley v. Vallejo.
it's quite frightening, and it sort of leads you to think, well, what do we do about this? Because I think we need to do something about it quite soon. I think if it gets to the point where it sounds sort of dystopian, but if we get to the point where very, very, very rich people can have AI that and robotics that defends all their shit and makes it so you literally can't do anything about it, that's not good. So I think we need to handle this within the next 5 or 10 years, and we probably, I'm not going to advocate for violence, but
We need that little bit from Malachi, FE does not represent the political views of anyone whatsoever. And it's time for some sort of action. If our lives are on the line, why should we sit there and be complacent?
because I think it's easy to be complacent. I think people will do nothing if nothing is an option that's on the table. I think probably we will screw ourselves over with climate change, and it won't be because we don't know it, or we're just sort of, whatever. I can watch Simpsons and random Netflix and shit. It's much easier to do nothing. And I don't think it's possible for governments really to get people on board with, oh, by the way, you can only eat meat twice a week, and you can only have chicken, and you have to eat less, and you can't drive to work anymore, you have to get public transport, and oh, by the way, you can't go on holiday by plane because that's banned now. Is not going to happen. No one with these policies is ever going to get elected. And so I think if we save the planet, it's going to be from new energy sources and taking greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. It's certainly not going to be by putting less in there, because no one is going to do that. It's political suicide, absolute political suicide.
I think we're just not framing it correctly. Factory farming, as far as the 2019 EPA study, I think they said that something like 40% of all greenhouse gases comes from our factory farming industry. But we have ways of turning that methane and carbon dioxide production to near zero levels with they found a algae-based diet will significantly lower the amount of methane that cows and pigs produce, but because it's more expensive than just
Yeah,
feeding them what is
exactly.
mashed up corn, they're not going to jump on it unless forced.
Yeah, I think it again comes down to money makes the world go round, and it's It's awfully sad. I mean, this is why we have antibiotic resistance problems, because the pigs and cows in China, well, they get more fat if I give them loads of antibiotics. So of course I'll do that. That makes me more money, and it's really annoying. But people are too self-interested. There's very little interest in global sort of survival. It's but you can sort of understand it for the subsistence people who need it to live. They can't afford their house otherwise. But the really rich people who they have already got a stupid amount of money, and they make more with this, but so what? You already have too much money. There's not like you gain anything by having more.
I think that's a whole discussion for another time. The factory farming as it exists, at least in America, is essentially slavery. They did a big study out here in North Carolina because we had the massive tropical storms 2 years ago, and we had a lot of water pollution from our hog farming because we supply more hogs than anywhere else in the country other than Michigan. And the way that we work, because we have most of our farmers are under contract by groups like Tyson. Tyson owns all of the pigs and all of the fruits of their labor, but the farmers own the pig, and uh, they don't own their like tractors and stuff, but they are still on the hook for any repairments that need to go in it. So groups like Tyson are holding their mortgage over their head, and they are getting very little expendable income to put forward lots of work and require lots of uh, undocumented immigrants doing the work for just so they can keep their house and still live. Basically, they don't get any money out of it.
Yeah. No, I think that's true of a lot of jobs. You work because you have to work to. You don't. You sort of live to work rather than having a life and work just as sort of a supplement for it. If you don't work, you die. That's not a satisfying existence. Shall we move on?
Yeah, I think it's about time. I'm actually really excited for this one, especially since this is up your avenue. So we're going to discuss exoplanets, especially the revelation of the new exoplanet K218b. That's about 130 light years away from here, and it has all the great buzzwords. It's in its star's habitable zone. They found water vapor. It has a livable temperature. They're even saying, even though they don't have all of the information yet, that it could be an ocean world and definitely habitable for humans. And that's exciting, but we still only have so much to go off of.
Yeah, I mean, over the next, I think they said that within the next 10 years, they'll be looking for signatures of other molecules in the planet's atmosphere that they believe that can only come from life forms. But the problem with this is that biologists can't actually agree which chemicals are only possible to get from life forms. And so even if we detect certain chemicals in the planet's atmosphere, we don't really know by consensus whether or not those are caused by life, and the hope is that within 10 years we will be able to agree on what those chemicals are. But yeah, they found water vapor definitely in the atmosphere. They think it actually rains on this planet now, and it's between, I think, 0 and 40 degrees Celsius. That's about 0 and 101 Fahrenheit or something, which obviously that means there's liquid water. Very different to, I think, Io in our is it Io in our solar system that has ice, but it's minus 200 degrees, so it's not really
Yeah.
going to have too much life there. And liquid water is, of course, it's whether or not they'll have life we could communicate with is a different matter. I think it would be very, very unlikely there would be. I get the impression that if you look at our DNA and you change 1 or 2%, you get a monkey or an orangutan, and you think the level of difference in intelligence and communication there is just unfathomable. So it's very likely that they're either way too advanced or nowhere near advanced enough to actually be about the same level we are. Is really, really, really unlikely. So I think I think it's probably the case that if there is life, it's a lot more primitive than ours is, because if it was more advanced, it would have found us by now, and probably we would have known that it had found us by now. So I would guess strongly that it hasn't, and that it probably therefore is more primitive. Don't know for sure, but it's
That's an absolutely fabulous topic, especially since Dana had brought up he wanted to hear paradoxes, and one of my absolute favorites is the Fermi paradox. That, for those of you who don't know what the idea is, there for every grain of sand on a beach, there is 1,000 worlds. So where the hell is everyone? And Simba's got it right. If they were more intelligent than us, then we'd hear from them. If any life that we're likely to find is most likely going to be lesser than our own. I remember seeing an article, I want to say it was probably clickbait, but back in 2014, they had found a new form of bacteria that subsists and excretes entirely electricity, which we do know is true.
wow.
We have found that. And there was I cannot find the article for the life of me, but there was a group arguing that they believe that this could easily exist in the clouds of one of Jupiter's moons.
Okay,
But
interesting.
that being said, our conception of life is significantly different from any other way it could independently form. The article I had read had discussed the potential different barriers to what creates sapiens in humans, and none of the options are particularly exciting. One says that the barrier is the move from single cell to multi cell organisms. A lot of arguments against that, but that would say that we're not special whatsoever. Everyone gets to this point. And then there's the alternative that sapiens is one of its own great last barriers, and we may be one of the only, if not the only, species to ever achieve it.
I would think the last one is very unlikely. It's again, it's not an entire consensus, but generally now astronomers believe the universe is infinite. Now, saying you're the best in an infinite universe is a very bold claim to make. If the universe was finite, okay, it's still a really tall claim, but maybe more reasonable. Um, but it doesn't feel like we're particularly advanced. You think of all the things that we can't do. There's a lot of bloody things we can't do, and I think talking about evolution as well. You mentioned sort of what does it take to get to humans like we are. I think it's the case that you could independently evolve from single-celled organisms and come to a species that doesn't resemble us at all, but is equal in terms of technology and communication, that sort of stuff. I don't think that there's anything particularly vital about what we do. I mean, okay, they probably would evolve to stand on two legs because it lets you use your hands. That's really useful. They probably have opposable thumbs, again, really useful. But other than that, there's a lot of things that evolution looks like we fucked up, and we've sort of got away with it because, well, by that point we were the dominant species anyway, so we didn't matter too much.
I remember having this discussion not too long ago, actually. It seems like an aside, I promise it's not. Uh, a lot of the ways that we've conceived alien life in the past has been there's a name for the trope, but essentially it's Star Trek aliens, where they're just different forms of human with plastered on their faces. And as a result, one of the absolute most highly acclaimed movies by horror historians is The Blob. It's a movie that came out back in the 50s, and it's about just this giant gelatinous blob, and it is so far removed from the way that we view existence, humanity, life in
Mm.
general, that I think that's how we need to start looking at the potential of life on other planets. That whatever we may find, if they are in any way comparable or not to our own intelligence, that they won't look or interact anything like us.
No, and I think if they're anything like our own level of technology, we're never going to meet them because they're too far away. We don't have the technology that, I mean, okay, we might meet them millions of years in the future when they've evolved as well, but none of us here right now are going to meet them. because can't go that fast. Spaceships don't go that fast. And if they're of comparable technology, they're certainly not going to come here. If aliens land on Earth, we are absolutely fucked.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
yeah, like there's no way that anyone coming here is not like it'd be like we look at insects and we're like, lol, look at that thing, what can it do? It would be that same kind of comparison, and whether or not uh, it would make sense probably that they'd come peacefully, but think of it, for example, if you were to go back in history and you went to, say, Europe in the 15th century, then you'd kill them all. Not because you particularly wanted to, just because you've got modern bacteria and viruses, and they have no immunity to that. And yeah, it would be a disaster. So I don't want to meet any aliens. I think that would be a oh we're fucked moment. Not even if they didn't want to. Though, of course, if they were advanced enough to visit us, they probably know that, and so they probably, if they were peaceful, they'd just make it so it was okay. However, that's done. But I
I
can't
think it's
imagine
about
that.
time to move on to the next one, but if any way to end it, and of all places for it to be discussed, there's a great episode of Bob's Burgers where they have a very similar discussion. And the question is, if we send out a message for people in space to hear it, who's likely to respond? And the people with the technology who could respond to us and come find us are probably those who are out there taking out any comparable civilization for resources to enslave us, to uh, deal with competition, whatever that reason may be. But just if alien nature is anything like human nature, the nice ones that are that advanced are being taken out by the
less nice.
more
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. And I think humanity has that unpleasantness about it that probably would benefit us if we were to become advanced enough to pillage other galaxies. Lol. I shouldn't get fantasies of this, should I? Never mind. Yeah, let's move on.
Alrighty. So moving on from that, our next topic is: does the anonymity of the online world make loyalty generally a lie?
This is a heavier one. I think we had a discussion about ghosting and such on the podcast recently, and I do think that because people feel detached, although you sort of know that it's another person on the other end of the internet, because you feel detached from it, it's very easy to sort of take them for granted and not treat them like a real person. And I've certainly had problems with people I've been friends with for years, and then they suddenly hate me, and I'm like, but I've been your friend for years. How does that work? Um, it's it's weird. It's very unsettling. I don't like it.
And do you think the furry fandom exacerbates that in any way? The fact that we don't view each other as other human beings, but floofy folk.
I don't think that has anything to do with it, but I think the fact that the furry fandom attracts people who are not as strong socially as the average person, that probably does have something to do with it, because it means that the average empathy is lower. And so if you've got low empathy and you already see the people online as, not really the same as someone face to face, that probably is going to be a problem.
So how do we resolve this? I mean, we can have as many platitudes and niceties we want to throw around, but there has to be some sort of active way that we can try to add more humanity to the way that people interact with each other. And unfortunately, the obvious answer is like they do in China with the social credit score, where you tie your online activity to an actual real life identity. Everyone knows who you are when you say it. And
Yeah,
part of me, I'm sure the results have, they can speak for themselves, but from a moral, ethical, and as someone who likes my own privacy, I just don't like the idea.
so my mum and my stepdad went to China on holiday last year, and obviously we hear all this, oh, China's all this restrictive sort of shit. But they went there and everyone was happy, they said. And they went to a public park and they had proper like sort of state-of-the-art gym equipment that was in good condition and people used it publicly. They had tennis courts again publicly that were no vandalism, no graffiti, nothing like that. And my parents spoke to the people and they asked them what's it like living here, and they were all really pleased and really happy. And so if you are, oppressed socially, whatever that means, do you think that perhaps we're just led to believe that we are oppressed socially rather than actually being oppressed socially if we're subject to that sort of thing? Because if you're happier and you're able to enjoy amenities that we just can't enjoy in the West because some dickhead will vandalize the bus stop or whatever.
Well, this is a DM I just got from Dana, and I think it's a great point to add here. He says, when asking, can we make our online interaction any more human? He says VR chat could be an example of that. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of on the fence there because, yes, it makes interaction feel a little more genuine, but I can't help but think of Wall-E, where you've got people literally sitting right next to each other and voice chatting.
Yeah, but there are scientific studies showing that VR does definitely increase your empathy. They've been using it recently to treat autism, and PTSD as well. I can't remember exactly the details, but there's another study as well where you have like a fake hand next to your actual hand, but you can't see your actual one because it's behind like a screen. And if they touch your fake hand, you can feel it on your. If you touch the fake hand, you can feel it as if it's your real hand and such. And there are trippy things like that. So if you can become immersed in a fake reality, so much so that it becomes more like your real reality, then you do have more empathy towards that, more affiliation, and I guess that makes people behave better. But I guess it goes back to the point we made earlier about religion being for the positives or the negatives. If people are scared into doing good things because, well, if not, China's going to take me away and torture me, is that a bad thing if it means we all get better things? Mm. If people are given the choice to behave nicely and because then everyone gets nice things and they choose not to. Is it really a bad thing to force them to be because they're afraid? Everyone gets good things at the end of the day.
Oh, that is a very complex topic, and I don't think I've
Mhm.
got enough time to actually find a way to respond to that meaningfully. I think it touches on uh, just how much autonomy does someone have,
Yeah.
just how much can someone be saved, quote unquote, rehabilitation. Definitely a topic for another time. You gotta let me gather my thoughts on that one.
I think in the West we're told we have autonomy over our lives and such, and we're taught to value that when really, you have to go to work, you have to get a job, you have to pay all your bills. I mean, do you think perhaps we don't have autonomy? We have fake autonomy, and if really we were to have a governmental system or some other sort of system, social credit system that took away autonomy and quite clearly took away autonomy, but made everyone better off and happier and gave us better public services and such. Well, I could imagine America's sort of, I'm America and I'm going to do what I want there. They wouldn't like that. But I think some countries in Europe would be more susceptible to it. I think countries like Sweden might adopt it. I know there's a law in Sweden. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's something like in any business, the CEO can't earn more than I think it's 5 times or 10 times what the worst paid employee gets. Whereas in the US and EU, I think it's 500 times as much in some places.
We don't have a cap on that whatsoever here.
Mm, yeah.
Which I do like. I like that policy in particular, but
Mhm.
just as I was going to say, I'm a reformist at heart where, yes, I can see the benefits of it, but if I think that there is some sort of fundamental flaw with the idea, this being that I think that it infringes on necessary social and personal liberty, that I'm going to look at ways to incorporate it. You know, the CEO pay cap multiplier is a great example of that, but on a worldwide scale, no, I have zero interest in creating this social credit score that's,
I think that's
especially
perhaps what
since I
the world
see it
needs,
so
honestly.
open for corruption. Where's the oversight? Is it done by the government, and then do you reward pro-government sentiment? Do you allow it to be done by
I think you need to
nonpartisan
allow AI to do it. I think AI is getting to the point now where it can detect pretty reliably whether an action is good or bad by self-learning algorithms, machine learning and stuff. So you want it to be decentralized. It shouldn't be managed by anyone. Let the AI decide what is a good and a bad thing, and it should reflect what society thinks is a good or a bad thing. And then you'd find, well, there's not any corruption because it's not managed by the government. It's not managed by the rich people.
But until we reach a point, until we reach the singularity, there won't be a perfect AI. The AI is still
It
developed by
doesn't need to be
humans.
perfect, though. Well, I mean, yeah,
What is
but machine
the
learning
margin of
is.
error that we allow?
Well, I mean, there are many fields at the moment where the best AI is better than the best humans. Even some surgical procedures now are better done by machines than the best surgeons in the world. So if you're going to allow machines to make life and death decisions like that and operations, well, I don't think this is any more of an ask than that. Shall we move on?
Yeah, I think we've got time for one more topic tonight. So I'm gonna let you pick because we had a couple ideas for our last one.
Okay. Let's have we got anything that's a little bit different? What do you want? So I'm thinking either learning a foreign language or how did we get into the furry fandom? What do you prefer?
We've not done a lot of fluffy stuff tonight, so why don't we discuss how we got into the fandom?
Okay. How about you?
Okay. Uh, well, I first got into the fandom. It has now been, Lord, 12, 13 years or so. It was very shortly after my father died, and about that time I found out I was gay, so outside of the few core people in my life, I found a lot of isolation. I was very depressed. And I don't even remember what it was exactly that made me first aware of the fandom. I think it was just general fan art. I liked sites like DeviantArt and stuff like that, which eventually led to Fur Affinity, which eventually led to me deciding, oh, wow, maybe I'm a wolf. And you can see how long that lasted. But I got into the fandom because there was that general interest in the subject, and I've always loved my Disney movies. But the community was what first got me involved because I found a lot of folk like me who were looking for acceptance, who were socially isolated to an extent, people who really just wanted some love and had their own love to give. And I thought that fit me to a T. So I started getting involved in the furry art sites and creating my own furry art, not visual, but I wrote. I got very involved in internet forums because back in the day before Reddit, people spoke through things called forums, which is like
Slow.
Discord, but a lot slower.
Was
It's like the snail mail of Discord.
yeah, I guess it's sort of like between email and Discord in a way.
Yeah.
Was the furry fandom the first fandom you came across?
I was also very involved in. It's harder to call it a fandom, especially since it's music. But I was big into punk, emo, hard rock, metal, that sort of stuff. That was the style I rocked for the longest time. The dyed black hair, long, all black. You would not recognize Little Nova, I promise you.
Well, you've got a white stripe now. That's the
Oh, yes, I
difference.
do. Makes me fabulous.
Absolutely fabulous and cute before you protest. Right, for me, it
Ooh,
was
beat me to the punch. Go ahead.
I think for me, obviously, you can tell from my name, I got into furry through Lion King. A little bit before Lion King 3 was released, which was 2004, 2005 or so. A couple of years before that, I was getting into things. I liked playing Neopets. There's very little I was allowed to do when I was young on the internet. It was sort of the late 90s, where internet was still young. We had a modem. It made all sorts of weird like noises when it's connecting and stuff, and it was slow. If we had a 3 kilobyte download speed, that was amazing. That meant I was getting my game downloaded in like 6 or 7 hours. I was pleased with that. But back then there was a lot more suspicion about the internet. So at first I was only ever allowed to go online to play chess, and over time I wasn't allowed an email, but I managed to get my parents to allow me to play Neopets when I was about 11 or 12 or so, and from there found more Lion King people and ended up on Lion King chat rooms and stuff. As I mentioned earlier, I ended up being a bit of an RP RP lion in some of these chat rooms. That's how I discovered sexuality and such. But from there, we all were just lions, like characters from Lion King, and we all had our own lion that we'd RP as, and there were some of the lions that were into this furry thing, and one of them in particular, a guy called Fuzzy. I looked up to him quite a lot. He was very friendly to me. There were quite a lot of people on the Lion King sites who were not very nice to me when I was younger. But Fuzzy was always very sweet. He took care of me a lot, and so I sort of aspired to be more like him. And he was big into the furry stuff, and so I hung out with him a bit, and he slowly sort of introduced me to things, and then I guess became more of a furry. But it was weird in a way, because I sort of implicitly just figured, well, we're all just lions. It's just this furry thing, just a lion thing, right? But it was, there were more than lions. I wasn't expecting that. I mean, on the Lion King sites that I went on, there was a case like someone who'd RP as a wolf, and I'd look down on them because I'm like, "Why are you a wolf? We're lions. What are you doing?" It's strange and a bit weird, but yeah. So I guess I just went from there, and I've always been a lion. I couldn't imagine being anything else. I think I said if I had to choose, I'd be a fox, but I can't see it. It's not me.
So, were there, just out of curiosity, were there any other big Disney movies that got you involved in the fandom other than The Lion King?
No, not at all. I remember must have only been 3 years old, and I was reading a book about lions to my mum, and I felt really strong affinity, just a sort of attraction to them, sort of an affiliation to them, and I always felt that growing up, and I don't know what it was about them, but I'd always felt very strongly connected to them, and so obviously with the Lion King movies and such, that was more lion, more lion. I loved lions, and yeah, I don't know why. I was a timid young autistic child. It's not like a lion is not going to be. But, they're intimidating as a species. They're not the friendliest and warmest creatures, and so I don't know why I really gravitated towards them. Just I did, and it felt right, and so yeah, that's sort of what it was. I don't know. I'm not into any of the weird spirituality shit, but if that stuff is true, I guess I probably am a spirit lion or some bullshit. It's all a load of rubbish, but if it was real, if it were real.
I love The Lion King and all, but a Robin Hood was my deal growing up. Oh my goodness.
Tell you what, I never saw Robin Hood until our movie night about 3 months ago.
Seriously?
Yeah. I didn't even realize it was animated. I thought it was just some, like, actually the actors and stuff. But yeah, I tell you what, movie night actually has helped me see a lot of movies that I never would have watched otherwise. But I'm like, I like this, Fantastic Mr. Fox, a brilliant movie. I love it.
Oh my goodness. It has been so
Fox,
long.
he reminds me of me far too much. Sort of naughty, gets into trouble, but has a good heart and is trying to do the best for people. I love it. I did my ex was big into, it's not Disney, I don't think. My ex was big into Balto, so I got into Balto quite a bit, but I was already 8-9 years into furry at that point, so not quite the same.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Hell, Zootopia came out, I was 21, and I still fell in love with it, much the same way I fell in love with some of these other ones.
I think the way that Zootopia speaks to furries, and it has references that we only get, and I think normal people just don't notice this sort of stuff. So I think it was quite clever how they included that, and I think that it allows us to appreciate that movie in a way, even though we're already furries, that it's not so much converting people to furries as it is also engaging those who already are. I like that movie too. Very, very, very idealistic, and you can tell there are significant sort of political undertones and racial undertones and such in this. So it's actually quite a you could do sort of like a media studies analysis and breakdown of Zootopia. There's some quite deep themes in it, but
Yeah.
on the surface, hey, cute. Look, that bunny's got a police job. That's cute, isn't it? But they say the same for Lion King. It's like are the black people, what they see as the outlanders, ostracized and forced to live in the crap areas, and there's a lot of racial parallels that people draw with Lion King in the same sort of way. I think a
Well, in
lot
the
of these movies
Be
are.
Prepared sequence, that is definitely Nazi inspired.
Right. Yeah, you certainly wouldn't get away with that if you put it in 20. I mean, it's 25 years ago now. Lion King was released. Times change.
Do we want to go ahead and wrap up, though? We are about to hit that 1 hour mark.
Yeah, we could. It's up to you. Do you want to do one more topic, or do you want to wrap up there? Don't mind.
Oh, we could do one more topic. Let's see if we've got anything in Floof Talk.
If any of you have suggestions for topics you want us to post about right now, then Floof Talk. Cutest animal I ever saw was Darkwise, 100%.
There's something about a pineapple Sona.
Oh, that's a good one. Do you want to go first, Detective Shuichi?
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. Now, first, I do want to say, any tips on making a Sona? I will have our video for the last podcast out. We discussed finding your persona. A lot of fun. We had two great guests. We had Dana and Marlboro discuss exactly what it's like to create a persona and what that means. So that'll be awesome. Okay, if you had to change something about your persona, what would it be? Do you want to answer that first?
I think, honestly, Shuichi, I've been a furry for over 15 years. If I was going to change something about my persona, I probably would have done it by now. I'm happy with my persona. So although it's a good question, I think my answer is simply I'm happy with what I've got.
No, a lunatic bursts into your house, holds a gun to your head, and says, "Change something about your persona right now." What are you gonna do? We're
Jesus.
talking your life is on the line here.
Um, that's really difficult. You go first. I genuinely am finding that hard. You go first if you've got something in mind. I'll have a think.
I mean, if I had to change anything about my persona, I mean, I like who it is as a character, especially how it reflects me. But I do recognize that compared to most furries, Nova is basically just a skunk. I just have the floofy tail and the blue pobs. So maybe I'd give it some interesting markings. Uh, I don't know, splatter some interesting colors on the tail. I don't know. I've never really thought about it that much because I'm happy with it, but I mean, Nova's been my persona for 10 years now. If I like Simba said, if I had to change something about it, I would have done it by now. But
Yeah.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
no harm in being unique, so maybe I'd spice up the fur pattern a little bit.
Yeah, I think I guess if I had to, I'd get like a FV tattoo logo or something. I don't bloody know. I mean, only
Give it a
I
cutie
suppose.
mark.
Yeah, I guess the main thing that has changed in my life in the past 9 months is FV has become a thing. Obviously we've rebranded and we've got all that stuff. So maybe I'd get an FV logo tattoo. I'm just for the record, I really disapprove of tattoos and piercings and body mod stuff. But if I had to, absolutely had to, then I get a FV tattoo. And Nurse follows up with, do you not feel stuck with an image because you've had it for so long? No, it's I if I were felt stuck with it, I'd change it, I guess. Okay, shall we wrap up?
I guess so.
Cool.
So thank everyone for coming to our absolute first Floof Talk. I think it went great. I had an absolute blast. Simba, thanks for joining me tonight.
Yeah, likewise. It was great. I had a lot of fun.
So we're going to be doing this again, same time, same place, Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern. You can put any suggestions you have for us in the Floof Talk text chat right above this voice chat at any point. You saw that we went everywhere tonight. We talked a little about science, politics, furry stuff. So everything's on the table, guys. Whatever you want to hear, please put it in there. We'll also have our upcoming podcast on Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be discussing Fursuiting 101, Fursuiting for Beginners. Any questions you have on that topic can go in the podcast text chat, which is right between Floof Talk and this chat.
Thanks for attending, everyone. Super appreciate it. We're appreciated for the support, and those of you on Twitch equally as appreciative. I hope to see you again next week. Again, yeah. If you have any suggestions, don't wait until next week. You can DM them to me, to Nova, or put them in the Floof Talk chat or Telegram, whatever. Make sure we're aware. Tag us.